Near nothing at all except for grass fields and the occasional tree, there stood a small, simple wooden hut, far away from the skyscrapers of San Benito, far away from everything except for the dirt road that led to a wider road about a mile away. Trotting along this dirt road was a man of averageness. From far away nothing stood out about this man, but upon closer inspection one can deduce much more about this man. He was knobbly, all bones and skin, yet at the hips a belly bulged that seemed not so much full of fat, but as if it was constantly filled with unproportional amounts of air, almost as if this man had an inflated balloon lingering in his stomach. His face was long, somber, and devilishly handsome, as gnarled black hair hung over his forehead. The corners of his mouth always seemed to be affected by gravity more than other parts of his face, just enough to make them droop as if he was frowning. Yet his eyebrows were always raised, eyes wider than a bush baby, giving the sense of something other than melancholy, fear. In addition to the shape of his eyes, everything else about his eyes augmented the sense of fear emanating from this man. Wide, frantic, and raven, they are full of darkness, like the bottom of a pitch-black pit. But not the darkness usually associated with evil, but the darkness that is affiliated with the terrible feeling of being lost. So if one were to look deep into his eyes, they would see a scared little boy curled up in a dark corner with the same wide eyes, trying to see through the darkness for even the slightest glint of light. This man of obscurity went by the name given to him at birth, Macallan Dakota. Not that many ever use the name, since Macallan has never said more than a syllable to anyone in a long time. But now Macallan slowly walks to a local tattoo shop about 5 miles down the road. This road has the occasional road branching off of it, but Macallan has deemed it quiet enough to travel on without having to interact with any people, since many these days see Macallan as a freak since his horrible incident at the hospital outside of San Benito. After no more than 30 seconds of painfully clear thoughts, Macallan starts to sprint as fast as he can down the road. As he ran, he started to develop a very clouded state of mind, as most do when they are working their heart at such a vigorous pace. He started to fatigue a mile away from his destination, but he did not dare stop, for he feared his clear-headed thoughts would come back and eat him alive like a snake, slowly passing its prey through its entire body in darkness, to make for a long, slow death. Finally, he reached the tattoo parlor, a plain, square brick building, looking almost as average as Macallan does from a distance. Overhead hung a tilted sign reading SB Tattoos. Ink tells a story. Adrenaline still pumping with the force of a fire hydrant, Macallan knew it would be fine to walk for now, because it would be some time before his heart finally calmed down, leaving him with a lasting muddled feeling in his head, which put him at ease. He was safe from his thoughts, for now. Inside was a woman with a name tag that said Ivy. Matt glanced at the woman for the slightest moment, then instantly pulled his obscure eyes away to rest on the floor while he pulled a crumpled piece of paper out of his pocket. On it was a beautiful golden retriever with long flaxen hair that mimicked the flowing movements of the wind, with the sun shining a bright white reflection off its hair at the same time. He showed the image to Ivy, who immediately understood as she took the photo and started to trace it. She was taking her time, making sure all of the curves were exactly as laid out. Macallan began to panic. He knew it was for the best that she do the utmost professional job on an image that would never leave his skin, but as she ate away at time, clear thoughts started to seep into Macallan's brain and send him into a panic due to the slowing of his heart. He had to get rid of these thoughts before he did something uncontrollably irrational, which happens whenever these lucid thoughts become the only ones in his mind. He started to hyperventilate. Slowly his heart began to pound again, returning him to the mental safety he was so fond of. Ivy gave Macallan a contorted glance, but did not seem to be worried or scared in any way, as she immediately went right back to work. As Macallan continued to breathe painfully heavy, Ivy finished her tracing and approached Macallan. He took a step back, a hint of fear in his posture, but noticed she was no threat so he sat down at one of the tattooing tables and simply looked at Ivy as he continued to breathe out of control. He began to feel a bit more comfortable around Ivy, especially since he started to look her straight in the eyes without any break in his gaze. She stood there for a moment, trace in hand, looking right back into his eyes with an inquisitive expression on her face. His eyes were portraying a gloomy sensation, sending a chill down her spine. Then he understood, appreciating her respect for his preference for silence, and pointed a bony finger to his back. She rolled him over, lifted his shirt, and began to apply the trace to his back. With one quick movement, she lifted the trace off of him, leaving the beautiful lines of the canine on his back. Ivy then reached for her tattooing machine, beginning to trace over the trace lines with her machine. Instantly, pain pierced Macallan's body, both figuratively and literally. As Ivy cautiously carved her way through every roll and curve in Macallan's back, black ink with the same darkness filling Macallan's eyes spread through his skin cells, making them forever dark. As physical pain wrenched tears from his eyes, he grieved for the fact that he was welcoming more darkness into his life. But he knew that in the end, the purpose of this tattoo would forever outweigh the fact that he was becoming more concentrated with this eerie darkness than ever before.